welcome back to Emerald Lake. Hello, everybody that's here. Okay, so evening read. Yes, I'm alive again. She lives. Okay. I have. I have Fairytales on the bracket today, or for this stream. Some of the stuff that I've read before. We had done the blue fairy book, and now we're into the green fairy book. So it will be some stories from that. Actually, it looks like none of them are the exact same titles. So if they're the same story, they're probably at least a little bit different. But it will be a bunch of fairy tales. I have also the triggers up so that if you would like to request ASMR stuff, we are back to properly doing that instead of just chatting the whole way through, which I will still be doing in the afternoon, as I call it, reads. Usually that's not afternoon for anybody, but it's closer to call it that. Okay. Just making sure everything's sorted. Alright. Okay. Yep. Alright, so the first story. Hello. You just subscribed again. Thanks. Just lurking, that's fine. Lurking's always fine. And then, yeah, I'm gonna just put up the title because the first story is called The Bluebird. So here we go. Alright. Once upon a time, there lived a king who was immensely rich. He had broad lands and sacks overflowing with gold and silver, but he did not care a bit for all his riches, because the queen, his wife, was dead. He shut himself up in a little room and knocked his head against the walls for grief, until his head was as it was. Oh no, I skipped. Until his courtiers were really afraid that he would hurt himself. So they hung feather beds between the tapestry and the walls, and then he could go on knocking his head as long as it was any consolation to him without coming to much harm. All his subjects came to see him and said whatever they thought would comfort him. Some were grave, even gloomy with him, and some agreeable, even gay, but not one could make the least impression upon him. Indeed, he hardly seemed to hear what they said. At last came a lady who was wrapped in a black mantle, and seemed to be in the deepest grief. She wept and sobbed until even the king's attention was attracted, and when she said that, far from coming to try and diminish his grief, she, who had just lost a good husband, was come to add her tears to his, since she knew what he must be feeling, the king redoubled his lamentations. Then he told the sorrowful lady long stories about the good qualities of his departed queen, and she in her turn recounted all the virtues of her departed husband. And this passed the time so agreeably that the king quite forgot to thump his head against the feather beds, and the lady did not need to wipe the tears from her great blue eyes as often as before. By degrees they came to talking about other things in which the king took an interest, and in a wonderfully short time the whole kingdom was astonished by the news that the king was married again, to that sorrowful lady. Now the king had one daughter, who was just 15 years old. Her name was Fiordalisa, and she was the prettiest and most charming princess imaginable, always gay and merry. The new queen, who also had a daughter, very soon sent for her to come to the palace. Turritella, for that was her name, had been brought up by her godmother, the fairy Mazilla. But in spite of all the care bestowed upon her, she was neither beautiful nor gracious. Indeed, when the queen saw how ill-tempered and ugly she appeared beside Fiordalisa, she was in despair, and did everything in her power to turn the king against his own daughter, in the hope that he might take a fancy to Turritella. One day the king said that it was time Fiordalisa and Turritella were married, so he would give one of them to the first suitable prince who visited his court. The queen answered, "My daughter certainly ought to be the first to be married. She is older than yours and 1,000 times more charming." The king, who hated disputes, said, "Very well, it's no affair of mine. Settle it your own way." So the queen knew that her daughter was not actually more charming, but she said that. That's interesting. Very soon after came the news that King Charming, who was the most handsome and magnificent prince in all the country around, was on his way to visit the king. As soon as the queen heard this, she set all her jewelers, tailors, weavers, and embroiderers to work upon splendid dresses and ornaments for Turritella. But she told the king that Fiordalisa had no need of anything new, and the night before the king was to arrive, she bribed... It says the king, but they mean the charming prince, but he is also a king, and they just don't specify our central king, the father king. So I'll say prince where I can. The night before the prince was to arrive, she bribed her waiting woman to steal away all the princess's own dresses and jewels, so that when the day came, and Fiordalisa wished to adorn herself, as became her high rank, not even a ribbon could she find. However, as she easily guessed who had played her such a trick, she made no complaint, but sent to the merchants for some rich stuffs. But they said that the queen had expressly forbidden them to supply her with any, and they dared not disobey. So the princess had nothing left to put on but the little white frock she had been wearing the day before, and dressed in that she went down when the time of the prince's arrival came, and sat in a corner hoping to escape notice. The queen received her guest with great ceremony, and presented him to her daughter, who was gorgeously attired, but so much splendor only made her ugliness more noticeable, and the king, or prince, after one glance at her, looked the other way. The queen, however, only thought that he was bashful, and took pains to keep Turritella in full view. King Charming, the prince, then asked if there was not another princess called Fiordalisa. "Yes," said Turritella, pointing with her finger, "there she is, trying to keep out of sight because she is not smart." At this Fiordalisa blushed, and looked so shy and so lovely that the prince was fairly astonished. He rose, and bowing low before her, said, "Madam, your incomparable beauty needs no adornment." Adornment. Come on, pronunciation, even. "Sire," answered the princess, "I assure you that I am not in the habit of wearing dresses as crumpled and untidy as this one, so I should have been better pleased if you had not seen me at all." "Impossible," cried King Charming, the prince. "Wherever such a marvelously beautiful princess appears, I can look at nothing else." Here the queen broke in, saying sharply, "I assure you, sire, that Fiordalisa is vain enough already, Pray make her no more flattering speeches." The king quite understood that she was not pleased, but that did not matter to him, so he admired Fiordalisa to his heart's content, and talked to her for 3 hours without stopping. The queen was in despair, and so was Turritella. When they saw how much the prince preferred Fiordalisa, they complained bitterly to the king, and begged and teased him until he at last consented to have the princess shut up somewhere out of sight while King Charming, the prince's visit, lasted. So that night, as she went to her room, she was seized by 4 masked figures and carried up into the topmost room of a high tower, where they left her in the deepest dejection. She easily guessed that she was to be kept out of sight for fear the prince should fall in love with her, but then how disappointing that was, for she already liked him very much, and would have been quite willing to be chosen for his bride. As King Charming did not know what had happened to the princess, he looked forward impatiently to meeting her again, and he tried to talk about her with the courtiers who were placed in attendance on him, but by the queen's orders they would say nothing good of her, but declared that she was vain, capricious, and bad-tempered, that she tormented her waiting maids, and that in spite of all the money that the king gave her, she was so mean that she preferred to go about dressed like a poor shepherdess. How does that make you mean? Anyway, rather than spend any of it. All these things vexed the king very much, and I think that's the prince vexed the prince very much, and he was silent. It is true, thought he, that she was very poorly dressed, but then she was so ashamed that it proves that she was not accustomed to be so. I cannot believe that with that lovely face she can be as ill-tempered and contemptible as they say. No, the queen must be jealous of her for the sake of that ugly daughter of hers, and so these evil reports are spread. Prince King Charming, man, why does she have to be beautiful to be good? Why does the other one, why can she not be beautiful and bad, or the ugly and good? It's weird, but fun. Alright. The courtiers could not help seeing that what they had told the prince did not please him, and one of them cunningly began to praise Fiordalisa when he could talk to the prince without being heard by the others. King Charming thereupon became so cheerful and interested in all he said that it was easy to guess how much he admired the princess. So when the queen sent for the courtiers and questioned them about all they had found out, their report confirmed her worst fears. As to the poor Princess Fiordalisa, she cried all night without stopping. It would have been quite bad enough to be shut up in this gloomy tower before I had ever seen King Charming, she said, but now when he is here, and they are all enjoying themselves with him, it is too unkind. The next day, the queen sent King Charming splendid presents of jewels and rich stuffs, and among other things an adornment made expressly in honor of the approaching wedding. It was a heart cut out of one huge ruby, and was surrounded by several diamond arrows, and pierced by one. A golden true lover's knot above the heart bore the motto, "But one can wound me," and the whole jewel was hung upon a chain of immense pearls. Never, since the world has been a world, had such a thing been made, and the king, I'm guessing the prince was quite amazed when it was sent to him. The page who brought it begged him to accept it from the princess, who chose him to be her knight. "What?" cried he. "Does the lovely Princess Fiordalisa deign to think of me in this amiable and encouraging way?" "You confuse the names, sire," said the page hastily. "I come on behalf of Princess Turritella." "Oh, it is Princess Turritella who wishes me to be her knight," said the prince coldly. "I am sorry that I cannot accept the honor. and he sent the splendid gifts back to the queen and Turritella, who were furiously angry at the contempt with which they were treated. As soon as he possibly could, King Charming went to see the king and queen, and as he entered the hall he looked for Fiordalisa, and every time anyone came in, started around to see who it was, and was altogether so uneasy and dissatisfied that the queen saw it plainly, but she would not take any notice, and talked of nothing but entertainments she was planning. The prince answered at random, and presently asked if he was not to have the pleasure of seeing the Princess Fiordalisa. "Sire," answered the queen haughtily, "her father has ordered that she shall not leave her own apartments until my daughter is married." "What can be the reason for keeping that lovely princess a prisoner?" cried the king and the prince in indignation. "That I do not know," answered the queen, "and even if I did, I might not feel bound to tell you." "I thought that the king was with them." Okay. The prince was terribly angry at being thwarted like this. He felt certain that Turritella was to blame for it, so casting a furious glance at her, he abruptly took leave of the queen and returned to his own apartments. There he said to a young squire whom he had brought with him, "I would give all I have in the world to gain the goodwill of one of the princess's waiting women and obtain a moment's speech with Fiordalisa." "Nothing could be easier," said the young squire, and he very soon made friends with one of the ladies, who told him that in the evening Fiordalisa would be at a little window which looked into the garden, where he could come and talk to her. Only, she said, he must take very great care not to be seen, as it would be as much as her place was worth to be caught helping King Charming to see the princess. The squire was delighted and promised all she asked, but the moment he had run off to announce his success to the prince, the false waiting woman went and told the queen all that had passed. She at once determined that her own daughter should be at the little window, and she taught her so well all she was to say and do that even the stupid Turritella could make no mistake. The night was so dark that the king had not a chance of finding out the trick that was being played upon him, so he approached the window with the greatest delight and said everything that he had been longing to say to Fiordalisa to persuade her of his love for her. Turritella answered, as she had been taught, that she was very unhappy, and that there was no chance of her being better treated by the queen until her daughter was married. And then the prince entreated her to marry him, and thereupon he drew his ring from his finger and put it upon Turritella's. She answered him as well as she could. So they're actually face to face, and he doesn't realize this is the wrong girl. Sir? Okay. The prince could not help thinking that she did not say exactly what he would have expected from his darling Fiordalisa. Oh my god. But he persuaded himself that the fear of being surprised by the queen was making her awkward and unnatural. He would not leave her until she had promised to see him again the next night, which Turritella did willingly enough. The queen was overjoyed at the success of her stratagem, and I think this is supposed to say, and promised herself that all would now be as she wished. And sure enough, as soon as it was dark, the following night the prince came, bringing with him a chariot which had been given him by an enchanter who was his friend. This chariot was drawn by flying frogs. A chariot of frogs. And the prince, easily persuaded Turritella to come out and let him put her into it. Then, mounting beside her, he cried triumphantly, "Now, princess, you are free. Where will it please you that we shall hold our wedding?" And Turritella, with her head muffled in her mantle, answered that the fairy Mazilla was her godmother, and that she would like it to be at her castle. So the prince told the frogs, who had the map of the whole world in their heads, and very soon he and Turritella were set down at the castle of the fairy Mazilla. The prince would certainly have found out his mistake the moment they stepped into the brilliantly lighted castle, but Turritella held her mantle more closely around her, and asked to see the fairy by herself, and quickly told her all that had happened, and how she had succeeded in deceiving King Charming. So I guess it's her hood, the mantle. Anyway, "Oh ho, my daughter," said the fairy, "I see we have no easy task before us. He loves Fiordalisa so much that he will not be easily pacified. I feel sure he will defy us." Meanwhile, the prince was waiting in a splendid room with diamond walls, so clear that he could see the fairy and Turritella as they stood whispering together, and he was very much puzzled. "Who can have betrayed us?" he said to himself. "How comes our enemy here? She must be plotting to prevent our marriage. Why doesn't my lovely Fiordalisa make haste and come back to me?" What? Okay, so he could see Turritella in there. She had pulled down her mantle and is wondering where Fiordalisa is, I guess. I don't know. But it was worse than anything he had imagined when the fairy Mazilla entered, leading Turritella by the hand, and said to him, "King Charming, here is the Princess Turritella, to whom you have plighted your faith. Let us have the wedding at once." "I," cried the prince, "I marry that little creature? What do you take me for? I have promised her nothing." "Say no more. Have you no respect for a fairy?" cried she, angrily. "Yes, madam," answered the prince. "I am prepared to respect you as much as a fairy can be respected if you will give me back my princess." "Am I not here?" interrupted Turritella. "Here is the ring you gave me. With whom did you talk at the little window if it was not with me?" "What?" cried the prince angrily. "Have I been altogether deceived and deluded? Where is my chariot? Not another moment will I stay here." "Oh-ho," said the fairy, "not so fast." And she touched his feet, which instantly became as firmly fixed to the floor as if they had been nailed there. "Oh, do whatever you like with me," said the prince. "You may turn me to stone, but I will marry no one but Fiordalisa." He's had maybe one conversation with her, more like a couple of words, but okay. And not another word would he say, though the fairy scolded and threatened, and Turritella wept and raged for 20 days and 20 nights. At last the fairy Mazilla was said furiously, for she was quite tired out by his obstinacy, "Choose whether you will marry my goddaughter or do penance 7 years for breaking your word to her." And then the prince cried gaily, "Pray do whatever you like with me as long as you deliver me from this ugly scold." "Scold?" cried Turritella angrily. "Who are you, I should like to know, that you dare to call me a scold? A miserable prince who breaks his word and goes about in a chariot drawn by croaking frogs out of a marsh." I mean, to be fair, she never scolded him, as far as we were told in this story. She really... Oh my gosh, okay. "Let us have no more of these insults," cried the fairy. "Fly from that window, ungrateful prince, and for 7 years be a bluebird." As she spoke, the prince's face altered. His arms turned to wings, his feet to little crooked black claws. In a moment he had a slender body like a bird, covered with shining blue feathers. His beak was like ivory, his eyes were bright as stars, and a crown of white feathers adorned his head. As soon as the transformation was complete, the prince uttered a dolorous cry and fled through the open window. pursued by the mocking laughter of Turritella and the fairy Mozilla. He flew on until he reached the thickest part of the wood, and there, perched upon a cypress tree, he bewailed his miserable fate. Alas, in 7 years who knows what may happen to my darling Fiordalisa, he said. Her cruel stepmother may have married her to someone else before I am myself again, and then what good will life be to me? In the meantime, the fairy Mozilla had sent Turritella back to the queen, who was all anxiety to know how the wedding had gone off. But when her daughter arrived and told her all that happened, she was terribly angry, and of course all her wrath fell upon Fiordalisa. She shall have cause to repent that the prince admires her, said the queen, nodding her head meaningly. And then she and Turritella went up to the little room in the tower where the princess was imprisoned. Fiordalisa was immensely surprised to see that Turritella was wearing a royal mantle and a diamond crown, and her heart sank when the queen said, My daughter has come to show you some of her wedding presents, for she is King Charming's bride, and they are the happiest pair in the world. He loves her to distraction. All this time Turritella was spreading out lace and jewels and rich brocades and ribbons before Fiordalisa's unwilling eyes, and taking good care to display King Charming's ring, which she wore upon her thumb. The princess recognized it as soon as her eyes fell upon it, and after that she could no longer doubt that he had indeed married Turritella. In despair she cried, Take away these miserable gauds. What pleasure has a wretched captive in the sight of them? And then she fell insensible upon the floor, and the cruel queen laughed maliciously and went away with Turritella, leaving her there without comfort or aid. That night the queen said to the king that his daughter was so infatuated with King Charming, in spite of his never having shown any preference for her, that it was just as well she should stay in the tower until she came to her senses. To which he answered that it was her affair, and she could give what orders she pleased about the princess. Okay, thanks, shitty dad. When the unhappy Fiordalisa recovered and remembered all she had just heard, she began to cry bitterly, believing that King Charming was lost to her forever, and all night long she sat at her open window, sighing and lamenting. But when it was dawn, she crept away into the darkest corner of her little room and sat there, too unhappy to care about anything. As soon as night came again, she once more leaned out into the darkness and bewailed her miserable lot. Now it happened that King Charming, or rather the Bluebird, had been flying round the palace in the hope of seeing his beloved princess, but had not dared to go too near the windows for fear of being seen and recognized by Turritella. When night fell, he had not succeeded in discovering where Fiordalisa was imprisoned, and weary and sad he perched upon a branch of tall fir tree, which grew close to the tower, and began to sing himself to sleep. But soon the sound of a soft voice lamenting attracted his attention, and listening intently he heard it say, Ah, cruel queen, what have I ever done to be imprisoned like this? And I was not unhappy enough before, that you must needs come and taunt me with the happiness of your daughter is enjoying now she is King Charming's bride. The Bluebird, greatly surprised, waited impatiently for the dawn, and the moment it was light flew off to see who it could have been who spoke thus, but he found the window shut and could see no one. The next night, however, he was on the watch, and by the clear moonlight he saw that the sorrowful lady at the window was Fiordalisa herself. Because apparently he can't follow context clues. My princess, have I found you at last? Said he, alighting close to her. Who is speaking to me? Cried the princess in great surprise. Only a moment since you mentioned my name, and now you do not know me, Fiordalisa, he said sadly. But no wonder, since I am nothing but a bluebird and must remain one for 7 years. What? A little bluebird? Are you really the powerful King Charming? Said the princess, caressing him, so I guess she's holding the bird now. It is too true, he answered. For being faithful to you I am thus punished. But believe me, if it were for twice as long, I would bear it joyfully rather than give you up. Oh, what are you telling me? Cried the princess. Has not your bride, Turritella, just visited me, wearing the royal mantle and the diamond crown you gave her? I cannot be mistaken, for I saw your ring upon her thumb. Then the bluebird was furiously angry and told the princess all that had happened, how he had been deceived into carrying off Turritella, and how, for refusing to marry her, the fairy Mozilla had condemned him to be a bluebird for 7 years. The princess was very unhappy when she heard how faithful her lover was very happy, not, I think I said unhappy, how faithful her lover was, and would never have tired of hearing his loving speeches and explanations. But too soon the sun rose, and they had to part, lest the bluebird should be discovered. After promising to come again to the princess's window, as soon as it was dark, he flew away and hid himself in a little hole in the fir tree, while Fiordalisa remained devoured by anxiety, lest he should be caught in a trap or eaten up by an eagle. The princess was very happy when she heard how faithful her lover was, and would never have tired of hearing his loving speeches and explanations. But too soon the sun rose, and they had to part lest the bluebird should be discovered. After promising to come again to the princess's window as soon as it was dark, he flew away and hid himself in the fir tree. I just read that. But the bluebird did not long stay in his hiding place. He flew away and away until he came to his own palace and got into it through a broken window, and there he found the cabinet where his jewels were kept, and chose out a splendid diamond ring as a present for the princess. By the time he got back, Fiordalisa was sitting waiting for him by the open window, and when he gave her the ring, she scolded him gently for having run such a risk to get it for her. Promise me that you will wear it always, said the bluebird, and the princess promised on condition that he should come and see her in the day as well as by night. They talked all night long, and the next morning the bluebird flew off to his kingdom and crept into his palace through the broken window and chose from his treasures 2 bracelets, each cut out from a single emerald. When he presented them to the princess, she shook her head at him reproachfully, saying, "Do you think I love you so little that I need all these gifts to remind me of you?" And he answered, "No, my princess, but I love you so much that I feel I cannot express it, try as I may. I only bring you these worthless trifles to show that I have not ceased to think of you, though I have been obliged to leave you for a time." The following night he gave Fiordalisa a watch set in a single pearl. The princess laughed a little when she saw it and said, "You may well give me a watch, for since I have known you, I have lost the power of measuring time. The hours you spend with me pass like minutes, and the hours that drag through without you seem years to me." "Ah, princess, they cannot seem so long to you as they do me," he answered. Day by day he brought more beautiful things for the princess, diamonds and rubies and opals, and at night she decked herself with them to please him, but by day she hid them in her straw mattress. When the sun shone, the bluebird, hidden in the tall fir tree, sang to her so sweetly that all the passers-by wondered and said that the wood was inhabited by a spirit. And so 2 years slipped away, and still the princess was a prisoner, and Turritella was not married. The queen had offered her hand to all the neighboring princes, but they always answered that they would marry Fiordalisa with pleasure, but not Turritella on any account. Okay, so did she not learn her lesson? Did she not, say that something was wrong with she's in a tower. How would they have known about Fiordalisa? What the heck? Anyway, okay. They would not but not Turritella on any account. This displeased the queen terribly. Fiordalisa must be in league with them to annoy me, she said. Let us go and accuse her of it. So she and Turritella went up into the tower. Now it happened that it was nearly midnight, and Fiordalisa, all decked with jewels, was sitting at the window with a bluebird, and as the queen paused outside the door to listen, she heard the princess and her lover singing together a little song he had just taught her. These were the words. Oh, what a luckless pair are we, one in a prison and one in a tree. All our trouble and anguish came from our faithfulness spoiling our enemies' game. But vainly they practiced their cruel arts, for naught can sever our two fond hearts. They sound melancholy, perhaps, but the two voices sang them gaily enough, and the queen burst open the door, crying, Ah, my Turritella, there is some treachery going on here. As soon as she saw her, Fiordalisa, with great presence of mind, hastily shut her little window, that the bluebird might have time to escape, and then turned to meet the queen, who overwhelmed her with a torrent of reproaches. Your intrigues are discovered, madam, she said furiously, and you need not hope that your high rank will save you from the punishment you deserve. And with whom do you accuse me of intriguing, madam? Said the princess. Have I not been your prisoner these 2 years? And who have I seen except the gaolers sent by you? I don't know that one. We'll have to look up that one. Okay. While she spoke, the queen and Turritella were looking at her in the greatest surprise, perfectly dazzled by her beauty and the splendor of her jewels. Yeah, that's it exactly. Do you have a pronunciation suggestion or a definition? That's jailer? I haven't known that one, but I thought that from context that would be the definition. Alright, jailers. Okay. While she spoke, they're dazzled by the beauty, then the queen said, If one may ask, madam, where did you get all these diamonds? Perhaps you mean to tell me that you have discovered mine of them in the tower? I certainly did find them here, answered the princess. And pray, said the queen, with her wrath increasing every moment, for whose admiration are you decked out like this, since I have often seen you not half as fine on the most important occasions at court? So, I'm sorry, does that mean you're going to court? It sounds a lot like she's just been very bad at imprisoning the princess, or something's not adding up. For my own, answered Fiordalisa, you must admit that I have had plenty of time on my hands, so you cannot be surprised at my spending some of it in making myself smart. That's all very fine, said the queen suspiciously. I think I will look about and see for myself. So she and Turritella began to search every corner of the little room. When they came to the straw mattress, out fell such a quantity of pearls, diamonds, rubies, opals, emeralds, and sapphires that they were amazed and could not tell what to think. But the queen resolved to hide somewhere a packet of false letters to prove that the princess had been conspiring with the king's enemies, and she chose the chimney as a good place. Fortunately for Fiordalisa, this was exactly where the bluebird had perched himself, to keep an eye upon her proceedings and try to avert danger from his beloved princess. And now he cried, Beware, Fiordalisa, your false enemy is plotting against you. I'm gonna call it here, but now they know where you are, and dude, it would have been a better idea to watch her planted, let the lady leave, tell the princess, and throw the letters, or fly the letters out the window to get rid of them. I know that they were using smart as in pretty before, but like in this case, y'all are the ones that are not smart. Oh, you too. Okay. Or at least our Bluebird King Prince man, 'cause no. This strange voice so frightened the queen that she took the letter and went away hastily with Turritella. Or she's the one that's stupid. Why? You just got spooked and left? Okay. And they held a council to try and devise some means of finding out what fairy or enchanter was favoring the princess. That's a theory, you're right. At last they sent one of the queen's maids to wait upon Fiordalisa, and told her to pretend to be quite stupid and to see and hear nothing, while she was really to watch the princess day and night, and keep the queen informed of all her doings. Poor Fiordalisa, who guessed she was sent as a spy, was in despair, and cried bitterly that she dared not see her dear Bluebird for fear that some evil might happen to him if he were discovered. Yeah, Fiordalisa is not stupid, though, at least. We've got one brain in the bunch. The days were so long and the nights so dull, but for a whole month she never went near her little window lest he should fly to her as he used to do. However, at last the spy, who had never taken her eyes off the princess day or night, was so overcome with weariness that she fell into a deep sleep, and as soon as the princess saw that, she flew to open her window and cried softly, "Bluebird, blue as the sky, fly to me now, there's nobody by." And the bluebird, who had never ceased to flutter round within sight and hearing of her prison, came in an instant. They had so much to say, and were so overjoyed to meet once more, that it scarcely seemed to them 5 minutes before the sun rose, and the bluebird had to fly away. But the next night the spy slept as soundly as before, so the bluebird came, and he and the princess began to think they were perfectly safe, and to make all sorts of plans for being happy as they were before the queen's visit. But alas, the third night the spy was not quite so sleepy, and when the princess opened her window and cried as usual, "Bluebird, blue as the sky, fly to me now, there's nobody nigh," she was wide awake in a moment, though she was sly enough to keep her eyes shut at first. But presently she heard voices, and peeping cautiously, she saw by the moonlight the most lovely bluebird in the world, who was talking to the princess, while she stroked and caressed it fondly. The spy did not lose a single word of the conversation, and as soon as the day dawned and the bluebird had reluctantly said goodbye to the princess, she rushed off to the queen and told her all she had seen and heard. Okay, the queen sent for Turritella, and they talked it over, and very soon came to the conclusion that this bluebird was no other than King Charming himself. "Ah, that insolent princess," cried the queen. "To think that when we supposed her to be so miserable, she was all the while as happy as possible with a false king. But I know how we can avenge ourselves." So the spy was ordered to go back and pretend to sleep as soundly as ever. Ooh. And indeed she went to bed earlier than usual, and snored as naturally as possible, and the poor princess ran to the window and cried, "Bluebird, blue as the sky, fly to me now, there's nobody by." But no bird came. All night long she called and waited and listened, but still there was no answer, for the cruel queen had caused the fir tree to be hung all over with knives, swords, razors, shears, bill hooks, and sickles, so that when the bluebird heard the princess call and flew towards her, his wings were cut, and his little black feet clipped off, and all pierced and stabbed in 20 places. Could you not see that they were knives? Or maybe it was too dark. But still. You didn't figure out the first spot was... Oh, okay. He fell back bleeding. His feet all pierced and stabbed in 20 places. He fell back bleeding into his hiding place in the tree. and lay there groaning and despairing, for he thought the princess must have been persuaded to betray him to regain her liberty. Why would she do that? No. Ah, Fiordalisa, can you indeed be so lovely and so faithless? He sighed. And I may as well die at once. And he turned over on his side and began to die. What? But it happened that his friend the enchanter had been very much alarmed at seeing the frog chariot come back to him without King Charming. It's been 2 years, dude. Now you realize? Oh my god. Okay. And had been round the world 8 times seeking him, but without success. I'm getting heated about how people are just not thinking things through in this. It's been a while since we read these, so I'm not used to their nonsense. At the very moment when the king gave himself up to despair, he, the enchanter I guess, was passing through the wood for the 8th time, and called as he had done all over the world. Charming, King Charming, are you here? The king at once recognized his friend's voice and answered very faintly, I am here. Yeah, exactly, Fetster. The enchanter looked all around him, but could see nothing, and then the king said again, I am a bluebird. Then the enchanter found him in an instant, and seeing his pitiable condition, ran hither and thither without a word until he had collected a handful of magic herbs, with which, and a few incantations, he speedily made the prince king whole and sound again. Now, said he, let me hear all about it. There must be a princess at the bottom of this. At least the enchanter knows King Charming thinks with no brain. There are 2, answering the King Charming with a wry smile. That's a good bit, at least. And then he told the whole story, accusing Fiordalisa of having betrayed the secret of his visits to make her peace with the queen, and indeed saying a great many hard things about her fickleness and her deceitful beauty and so on. Okay, dude. You're an asshole. Okay. The enchanter quite agreed with him, and even went further, declaring that all princesses were alike. Oh, okay, so these 2 subscribe to that understanding of women. Okay. All of princesses were alike, except perhaps in the matter of beauty, and advised him to have done with Fiordalisa and forget all about her, but somehow or other this advice did not quite please the prince. Yeah, I'm not impressed either, Fetster. What is to be done next, said the enchanter, since you still have 5 years to remain a bluebird? Take me to your palace, answered the king. There you can at least keep me in a cage safe from cats and swords. We had yet heard anything about cats, so that makes me think. Maybe when on one of his visits back to his own castle, there's a cat. Okay. Well, that will be the best thing to do for the present, said his friend. But I am not an enchanter for nothing. I'm sure to have a brilliant idea for you before long. I should hope that you are competent in your work, Mr. Enchanter, sir. Yes. In the meantime, Fiordalisa, quite in despair, sat at her window day and night, calling her dear bluebird in vain, and imagining over and over again all the terrible things that could have happened to him, until she grew quite pale and thin. Girl, you don't even know how shitty he is. He turned on you like that. Okay. As for the queen and Turritella, they were triumphant, but their triumph was short, for the king, Fiordalisa's father, fell ill and died, and all the people rebelled against the queen and Turritella, and came in a body to the palace demanding Fiordalisa. Ooh. Okay, so people recognize Fiordalisa has not been seen for 2 fucking years. Assumedly, I like it. Also, love to see the general people in these sorts of stories stand up for themselves. Sounds great. Let's do that. Rebellion. Love it. Okay. The queen came out upon the balcony with threats and haughty words, so that at last they lost their patience and broke open the doors of the palace. Yeah, she did not make a good choice. One of which fell back upon the queen and killed her. Oh! Success. Turritella fled to the fairy Mozilla, and all the nobles of the kingdom fetched the Princess Fiordalisa from her prison in the tower and made her queen. There you go. Okay, there we are. Very soon, with all the care and attention they bestowed upon her, she recovered from the effects of her long captivity and looked more beautiful than ever. I don't care about that. Was she no longer deadly thin? Was she happy? I hope she's not depressed and starving. That's all. She was more beautiful than ever, and was able to take counsel with her courtiers and arrange for the governing of her kingdom during her absence. Ooh. Then, taking a bag full of jewels, she set out all alone to look for the bluebird, without telling anyone where she was going. So sweet. Oh, and smart. Oh, okay. Meanwhile, the enchanter was taking care of King Charming, but as his power was not great enough to counteract the fairy Mozillas, he at last resolved to go and see if he could make any kind of terms for his friend. For you see, fairies and enchanters are cousins in a sort of way after all. And after knowing one another for 500 or 600 years and falling out and making it up again pretty often, they understand one another well enough. So the fairy Mozilla received him graciously. Now I have to look back. What happened to Turritella? Yeah, she's with the fairy. And what may you be wanting, gossip? Said she. You can do a good turn for me if you will, he answered. A king, who is a friend of mine, was unlucky enough to offend you. Aha! I know who you mean, interrupted the fairy. I am sorry not to oblige you, gossip. Oh, I guess the enchanter's name is Gossip. Or, I don't know. But he need expect no mercy from me unless he will marry my goddaughter, whom you see yonder looking so pretty and charming. Let him think over what I say. The enchanter hadn't a word to say, for he thought Turritella really frightful, but he could not go away without making one more effort for his friend the king, who was really in great danger as long as he lived in a cage. Indeed, he had already met with several alarming accidents. What? Once the nail on which his cage was hung had given way, and his feathered majesty has suffered much from the fall, while Madame Puss, a cat, I guess. Why do we have to give the cat? Who happened to be in the room at the time, had given him a scratch in the eye, which came very near blinding him, and as we understand, he doesn't have feet anymore. Another time they had forgotten to give him any water to drink. What? Just forgotten? Okay. So that he was nearly dead with thirst. How long had they just forgotten water? And the worst thing of all was that he was in danger of losing his kingdom, for he had been absent so long that all his subjects believed him to be dead. Yes, the biggest danger isn't that he's dying, it's that he's no longer a king. Oh my god. So considering all these things, the enchanter agreed with the fairy Mozilla that she should restore the king to his natural form, and should take Turritella to stay in his palace for several months, and if after the time was over he could still not make up his mind to marry her, he should once more be changed into a bluebird. Then the fairy dressed Turritella in a magnificent gold and silver robe, and they mounted together upon a flying dragon, and very soon reached King Charming's palace, where he too had just been brought by his faithful friend the enchanter. 3 strokes of the fairy's wand restored his natural form, and he was as handsome and delightful as ever. But he considered that he paid dearly for his restoration when he caught sight of Turritella, and the mere idea of marrying her made him shudder. Meanwhile, Queen Fiordalisa, disguised as a poor peasant girl, wearing a great straw hat that concealed her face, and carrying an old sack over her shoulder, had set out upon her weary journey, and had travelled far, sometimes by sea and sometimes by land, sometimes on foot and sometimes on horseback, but not knowing which way to go. She feared all the time that every step she took was leading her farther from her lover. One day as she sat, quite tired and sad, on the bank of a little brook, cooling her white feet in the clear running water, and combing her long hair that glittered like gold in the sunshine, a little bent old woman passed by, leaning on a stick. She stopped and said to Fiordalisa, "What, my pretty child, are you all alone?" "Indeed, good mother." Ooh, I see somebody's following or something. It was teeny on my screen. But thank you. Indeed, good mother, I am too sad to care for company," she answered, and the tears ran down her cheeks. "Don't cry," said the old woman, "but tell me truly, what is the matter? Perhaps I can tell you. Perhaps I can help you." The queen told her willingly all that had happened, and how she was seeking the bluebird. Thereupon the little old woman suddenly stood up straight, and grew tall and young and beautiful, and said with a smile to the astonished Fiordalisa, "Lovely queen, the king who you seek is no longer a bird. My sister Mazilla has given his own form back to him, and he is in his own kingdom. Do not be afraid, you will reach him and will prosper. Take these 4 eggs. If you break one, when you are in any great difficulty, you will find aid." So saying, she disappeared, and Fiordalisa, feeling much encouraged, put the eggs into her bag and turned her steps towards Charming's kingdom. After walking on and on for 8 days and 8 nights, she came at last to a tremendously high hill of polished ivory, so steep that it was impossible to get a foothold upon it. Fiordalisa tried 1,000 times and scrambled and slipped, but always in the end found herself exactly where she started from. At last she sat down at the foot of it in despair, and suddenly bethought herself of the eggs. Breaking one quickly, she found in it some little gold hooks, and with these fastened to her feet and hands, she mounted the ivory hill without further trouble, for the little hooks saved her from slipping, and soon as she reached the top a new difficulty presented itself, for all the other side, and indeed the whole valley, was one polished mirror, in which thousands and thousands of people were admiring their reflections. For this was a magic mirror, in which people saw themselves just as they wished to appear, and pilgrims came to it from the 4 corners of the world, but nobody had ever been able to reach the top of the hill, and when they saw Fiordalisa standing there, they raised a terrible outcry, declaring that if she set foot upon their glass, she would break it to pieces. The queen, not knowing what to do, for she saw it would be dangerous to try and go down, broke the second egg, and out came a chariot, drawn by 2 little white doves. So, how do they carry your full-grown woman weight? Okay, fine, whatever. And Fiordalisa got into it and was floated softly away. After a night and a day, the doves alighted outside the gate of King Charming's kingdom. Here the queen got out of the chariot and kissed the doves and thanked them, and then, with a beating heart, she walked into the town, asking the people she met where she could see the king. But they only laughed at her, crying, "See the king? And pray why do you want to see the king, my little kitchen maid? You had better go and wash your face first. Your eyes are not clear enough to see him." For the queen had disguised herself, and pulled her hair down about her eyes, that no one might know her. As they would not tell her, she went on further, and presently asked again. And this time the people answered that tomorrow she might see the king driving through the streets with the Princess Turritella, as it was said that at last he had consented to marry her. This was indeed terrible news to Fiordalisa. Had she come all this weary way only to find Turritella had succeeded in making King Charming forget her? She was too tired and miserable to walk another step, so she sat down in a doorway and cried bitterly all night long. As soon as it was light, she hastened to the palace. After being sent away 50 times by the guards, she got in at last, and saw the throne set in the great hall for the king and Turritella, who was already looked upon as queen. Fiordalisa hid herself behind a marble pillar. Yeah, really? Fiordalisa hid herself behind a marble pillar, and very soon saw Turritella make her appearance, richly dressed, but as ugly as ever. Yeah, exactly. She was sent away 50 times. My thought is, could you not have once just thought, might as well let them see who I am and get in? No, we have to keep with the disguise? Okay, fine. We saw the queen die. But she is a smart lady, and this is fairy stuff, and maybe she's doing the stay hidden because of fairy stuff, which I'll give her that. Fiordalisa hid herself behind a marble pillar. We soon saw her still ugly as ever. And with her came the king, as in Charming. She just found the right person to be nice, I guess I would say. The king, more handsome and splendid even than Fiordalisa had remembered him. When Turritella had seated herself upon the throne, the queen approached her. "Who are you, and how dare you come near my high mightiness?" "Upon my golden throne," said Turritella, frowning fiercely at her. "They call me the little kitchen maid," she replied. "I have come to offer some precious things for sale." And with that she searched in her old sack and drew out the emerald bracelets King Charming had given to her. Yeah, again, I just seeing your comment, Fetster, but it's like she just got the right person that time, or people were like, okay, I can't tell you no again, just go in. Ho ho, said Turritella, those are pretty bits of glass. I suppose you would like 5 silver pieces for them. Show them to someone who understands such things, madam, answered the queen. They did just call Turritella the queen, I think those. Our Fiordalisa said. After that we can decide upon the price. Turritella, who really loved King Charming as much as she could love anybody, and was always delighted to get a chance of talking to him, now showed him the bracelets, asking how much he considered them worth. As soon as he saw them, he remembered those he had given to Fiordalisa, turned very pale and sighed deeply, and fell into such sad thought that he quite forgot to answer her. Presently she asked him again, and he said, with a great effort, "I believe these bracelets are worth as much as my kingdom. I thought there was only one such pair in the world, but here, it seems, is another." Then Turritella went back to the queen and asked her what was the lowest price she would take for them. "More than you would have..." Back to Fiordalisa. She didn't think it was going... "More than you would find it easy to pay, madam," answered she. "But if you will manage for me to sleep one night in the Chamber of Echoes, I will give you the emeralds." "By all means, my little kitchen maid," said Turritella, highly delighted. The king did not try to find out where the bracelets had come from, not because he did not want to know, but because the only way would have been to ask Turritella, and he disliked her so much that he never spoke to her if he could possibly avoid it. It was he who had told Fiordalisa about the Chamber of Echoes, when he was a bluebird. It was a little room below the king's own bedchamber, and was so ingeniously built that the softest whisper in it was plainly heard in the king's room. "Why would you build that? That's a terrible idea." Fiordalisa wanted to reproach him for his faithfulness. faithlessness, that's what it is, and could not imagine a better way than this. So, when by Turritella's orders she was left there, she began to weep and lament, and never ceased until daybreak. The king's pages told Turritella when she asked them what a sobbing and sighing they had heard, and she asked Fiordalisa what it was all about. The queen answered that she often dreamed and talked aloud. Okay. But by an unlucky chance the king heard nothing of all this, for he took a sleeping draught every night before he lay down, and did not wake up until the sun was nigh. The queen passed the day in great disquietude. If he did hear me, she said, could he remain so cruelly indifferent? But if he did not hear me, what can I do to get another chance? I have plenty of jewels, it is true, but nothing remarkable enough to catch Turritella's fancy. Just then she thought of the eggs, and broke one, out of which a little carriage of polished steel ornamented with gold, drawn by 6 green mice. The coachman was a rose-colored rat, the postilion a grey one, and the carriage was occupied by the tiniest and most charming figures, who could dance and do wonderful tricks. So they're like alive? Oh my god. Fiordalisa clapped her hands and danced for joy when she saw this triumph of magic art, and as soon as it was evening, went to a shady garden path down which she knew Turritella would pass. Then she made the mice gallop, and the tiny people show off their tricks, and sure enough Turritella came, and the moment she saw it all, she cried, little kitchen maid, what will you take for your mouse carriage? And the queen answered, let me sleep once more in the chamber of echoes. I won't refuse your request, poor creature, said Turritella condescendingly. And then she turned to her ladies and whispered, the silly creature does not know how to profit by her chances, so much the better for me. When night came, Fiordalisa said all the loving words she could think of, but alas, with no better success than before, for the king slept heavily after his draught. One of the pages said, this peasant girl must be crazy, but another answered, yet what she says sounds very sad and touching. As for Fiordalisa, she thought the king must have a very hard heart if he could hear how she grieved and yet pay her no attention. She had but one more chance, and on breaking the last egg she found her great delight that it contained a more marvelous thing than ever. It was a pie made of 6 birds, cooked to perfection, and yet they were all alive, singing and talking. That doesn't sound cool, that sounds horrifying. And they answered questions and told fortunes in the most amusing way. Okay, taking this treasure, Fiordalisa once more set herself to wait in the great hall, through which Turritella was sure to pass. And she sat there, as she sat there, one of the king's pages came by and said to her, well, little kitchen maid, it is a good thing that the king always takes a sleeping draught, for if he would be kept awake all night by your sighing and lamenting. Then Fiordalisa knew why the king had not heeded her, and taking a handful of pearls and diamonds out of her sack, she said, if you can promise me that tonight the king shall not have his sleeping draught, I will give you all these jewels. Oh, I promise that willingly, said the page. At this moment Turritella appeared, and at the sight of the savory pie, with the pretty little birds all singing and chatting, she cried, it is an admirable pie, little kitchen maid. Pray, what will you take for it? The usual price, she answered, to sleep once more in the chamber of echoes. By all means, only give me the pie, said the greedy Turritella, and when the night was come, Queen Fiordalisa waited until she thought everybody in the palace would be asleep, and then began to lament as before. Ah, charming, she said, what have I ever done that you should forsake me and marry Turritella? If you could only know all I have suffered, and what a weary way I have come to seek you. Now the page had faithfully kept his word and given King Charming a glass of water instead of his usual sleeping draught, so there he lay wide awake, and heard every word Fiordalisa said, and even recognized her voice, though he could not tell where it came from. "Ah, princess," he said, "how could you betray me to our cruel enemies when I loved you so dearly?" Fiordalisa heard him and answered quickly, "Find out the little kitchen maid, and she will explain everything." Then the king in great hurry sent for his pages and said, "If you can find the little kitchen maid, bring her to me at once." "Nothing could be easier, sire," they answered, "for she is in the Chamber of Echoes." The king was very much puzzled when he heard this. How could the lovely Princess Fiordalisa be a little kitchen maid? Or how could the little kitchen maid have Fiordalisa's own voice? So he dressed hastily and ran down a little secret staircase which led to the Chamber of Echoes. There upon a heap of soft cushions sat his lovely princess. She had laid aside all her ugly disguises and wore a white silken robe, and her golden hair shone in the soft lamplight. The king was overjoyed at the sight and rushed to throw himself at her feet and asked her 1,000 questions without giving her time to answer one. Fiordalisa was equally happy to be with him once more, and nothing troubled them but the remembrance of the fairy Mozilla. But at this moment in came the enchanter, and with him a famous fairy, the same in fact who had given Fiordalisa the eggs. After greeting the king and queen, they said that as they were united in wishing to help King Charming, the fairy Mozilla had no longer any power against him, and he might marry Fiordalisa as soon as he pleased. The king's joy may be imagined, and as soon as it was day the news was spread through the palace, and everybody who saw Fiordalisa loved her directly. Then Turritella heard what happened. She came running to the king, and when she saw Fiordalisa with him, she was terribly angry, but before she could say a word, the enchanter and the fairy changed her into a big brown owl, and she floated away out of one of the palace windows, hooting dismally. Then the wedding was held with great splendor, and King Charming and Queen Fiordalisa lived happily ever after. I knew there was no snoozes left. I knew the ad was coming, and I finished it with 10 seconds to spare. I did it. Ha ha. Anyway. Yeah, wow. Okay. Thank you. So they were just like, but did I sound entirely rushed? No, not terribly rushed at least. So he's just like really properly an idiot that he really didn't figure that out, and then he was like, "Oh, wait, how does Fiordalisa have? When is she the kitchen maid? When would the kitchen maid have Fiordalisa's voice? It's called a disguise, dumbass. You saw when you met her, she was pretty, but like dressed down. You know this is a thing. She would be perfectly capable of it, and you didn't know that she was a queen. You wouldn't have known that. So like, or maybe you would have found that out. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for the clap. And I love the little Death Noah, the little guys. But there, that was the Bluebird. It was a long one. It was a hefty one. I missed the wacky fairy tales and a little bit of the insanity is fun. It also read, I like when the two of them, they both had to fight for the marriage, you know, like their happy ending. The prince was like, "I'm a bird now," and the girl wasn't just like locked away. Oh, that's sad. That's very passive. She also then had to be like, "And now I gotta go find that frickin' bluebird again," and she did. She went through the thing. I like when they give the kind of, you know, quests to anybody in the relationship as opposed to very strictly the male. So that was fun. It does the slippery walls and the eggs thing. That's something that's like the way she had to like, "Oh, I'll buy it. I'll give you this very fancy thing to buy a night or an opportunity to be in the same room with a person. But oh, each time, for whatever reason, they're asleep or they're not there. And so I have to do that again." But They didn't change anything from the first time. Why did you think that? I guess she got it at the end, at least. Okay. But we've seen those bits and pieces in other stories, so, you know, it's just kind of like, oh, we'll take that from there, we'll put that in, we'll take that little plot device, put that in. It's not just fairy tale logic, it's a fairy tale recipe at that point. But okay, I have the triggers list up, and if no one requests anything, I will just pick things. So, double check the list. Give me a request. We'll do a couple of those. Of course. I mean, anytime that bubble wrap is an option, why wouldn't you choose bubble wrap? It's just, it would be stupid not to. Okay. Let's find a smaller piece if we can. Yeah. That's the fun news about getting the new desk, a chair. Even the keyboard, I think, had bubble wrap. There's bubble wrap. But okay. There you go. I'm glad. Okay, here we are. I'll just put this down and change the text quickly. This is too much wrinkly. Hold on. Okay. And that was a little sliver of the bubble wrap. I would like to know from those of you that like to listen to this. Was that too much crinkling? Was that precisely what you were thinking would happen? Would you expect more bubble wrap popping for one request? I'm learning this. This is a new sound for me. Okay, cool. Because, see, I've lived with too many people that would wring my neck for the sound of the crinklings, so it feels very, feels very wrong to be making all of that sound on purpose. But okay, cool. That was some bubble wrap. I still got lots more. You can still request that later, but I figure I'll do that much at once. Any other noises? Any other sounds, triggers? The beaded earrings are just listening to the beaded earrings I have up against. There's like a little bit of the beads. I don't know. Okay, we'll do those. Yeah, we'll do card shuffle next then. Perfect. My headphones are being a bit odd, so I can't fully tell where this is sounding. I'm going to just take a second. Okay, I think I fixed this. clumsy tonight for the freaking earrings. I think I need to have that louder next time. But okay. I'm still learning all of this and what I need specifically for my setup. But I'm going to move on to the card shuffle. It is. It absolutely is. Okay. Headphones. I want to still be able to hear things. Come on. Let's see how loud I can get this. Still quiet. Okay. I'll sort it out another time. I have a brand new deck of cards for tonight for this, and because I'm leaning in, my avatar is freaking out. But I need both my hands to open the cards, so too bad. Thank you, Fester. Just figuring this all out. Okay. Yeah. Slightly sippery. Alright. Oh, thanks for joining, Death Know, if you're headed out. You have a good rest of the night, too. Yeah, I'm readjusting now. Still excessive. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Sorry you kept getting startled. Is this better volume for this? And if this isn't working, I am thinking that these cards are louder than my old worn ones that are falling apart, and maybe I'll just use old ones. They'll be quieter, they're not as stiff. Perhaps something more like ruffling a book is what I should do. I brought the volume going back to what it was a minute ago, and I'm changing it. I'm not doing a proper card shuffle. These are too aggressive and loud. We're just doing a ruffling instead, like pages. Yes, it absolutely is. We'll do that. Don't fall over, Mike. All right, thank you very much for cooperating while that was very experimental. But now I know we don't do card shuffle, we'll do card dealing. And that'll be how I do that. Perfect. Okay, I will find a better set of cards for shuffling and test it on myself otherwise instead. Experimental ASMR. Well, as long as I still have as long as my streams still say still new to streaming, that is me saying I might be still doing things wrong. I warn you right there. But there you go. Okay. I will remove that. And I'm going to change the trigger list quickly so that it's not card shuffle, card dealing. And I do have the extra clicky clacky keyboard. I should be offering that one in there too. Woohoo. Typing. There you go. Okay, updated list. Changing it all around. Well, I'll make sure that they're not as loud. Or maybe just like using those particular cards more, they'll be less aggressive loud. They're still slippery, kind of new. Yeah. an unpredictable kind of stiff that I don't know when it's going to properly flip. Because it's, yeah. Yeah. I'll find my old ones again. It's just that, yeah, they were falling apart a little bit, and I want to protect them a little. They're slightly sentimental, those pet. Or I can just find another kind. We'll find it. Alright. We'll put away the trigger stuff, and we'll move on to reading again. Ditto. And the next one we're reading is called The Half Chick. Half bird is what I'm guessing, and not half lady. That kind of chick. Yeah, maybe like a harpy. We'll find out. It's also like, yeah, I'm gonna think of it as every time that chick, as opposed to like a little chick, 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 chick. My brain will go to the other thing. I don't know why. But okay, here we are. The half chick. Once upon a time, there was a handsome black Spanish hen who had a large brood of chickens. They were all fine, plump little birds, except the youngest, who was quite unlike his brothers and sisters. Indeed, he was a strange, queer-looking creature, that when he first chirped his shell, his mother could scarcely believe her eyes. He was so different from the 12 other fluffy, downy, soft little chicks who nestled under her wings. This one looked as if he had been cut in two. He only had one leg and one wing and one eye, and he had half a head and half a beak. His mother shook her head sadly as she looked at him and said, "My youngest born is only a half chick." Okay, so I've misunderstood the premise. And I'm terrified. I've actually had a nightmare when I was younger about animals and people being cut in half because someone showed me a biology book I was not prepared for. Because everything was cut in half and you could see inside. And then I imagined those things being alive, hopping around is just a half a thing. Put that one back in. It's not done yet. You're very correct, tetrahedron. Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me. Okay. I'm just having flashbacks. It's fine. My youngest born is only a half chick. He can never grow up a tall, handsome cock like his brothers. They will go out into the world and rule over poultry yards of their own, but this poor little fellow will always have to stay at home with his mother. And she called him medio pollito, which is Spanish for half chick. Now, though medio pollito was such an odd, helpless-looking little thing, his mother soon found that he was not at all willing to remain under her wing and protection. Indeed, in character, he was unlike his brothers and sisters. Unlike his brothers and sisters, as he was in appearance. They were good, obedient chicks. They were good, obedient chickens, and when the old hen chicked after them, they chirped and ran back to her side. But Medio Pollito had a roving spirit in spite of his one leg, just hopping around. And when his mother called him to return to the coop, he pretended that he could not hear, because he only had one ear. I mean, it's a fair excuse. When she took the whole family out for a walk in the fields, Medio Pollito would hop away by himself and hide among the Indian corn. Many an anxious minute his brothers and sisters had looking for him, while his mother ran to and fro, cackling in fear and dismay. As he grew older, he became more self-willed and disobedient, and his manner to his mother was often very rude, and his temper to the other chickens was very disagreeable. One day he had been out for a longer expedition than usual in the fields. On his return, he strutted up to his mother with a peculiar little hop and kick which was his way of walking, and cocking his eye at her in a very bold way, he said, "Mother, I am tired of this life in a dull farmyard, with nothing but a dreary maize field to look at. I'm off to Madrid to see the king." "To Madrid, Medio Pollito!" exclaimed his mother. "Why, you silly chick, it would be a long journey for a grown-up cock, and a poor little thing like you would be tired out before you had gone half the distance. No, no, stay at home with your mother, and some day when you are bigger, we will go a little journey together." "When you're a bigger cock, you can go to Madrid. Then you can have fun with the king." Okay. Medio Pollito had made up his mind. Oh my gosh, my brain just jumped. I'm not going to say that. Okay. And he would not listen to his mother's advice, nor to the prayers and entreaties of his brothers and sisters. What is the use of our all crowding each other up in this poky little place, he said. When I have a fine courtyard of my own at the king's palace, I shall perhaps ask some of you to come and pay me a short visit. And scarcely waiting to say goodbye to his family, away he stumped down the high road that led to Madrid. "Alrighty. Be sure that you were kind and civil to everyone you meet," called his mother, running after him. But he was in such a hurry to be off that he did not wait to answer her or even to look back. He's a busy little dude, okay. A little later in the day, as he was taking a shortcut through a field, he passed a stream. Now the stream was all choked up and overgrown with weeds and water plants, so that its waters could not flow freely. "Oh, Medio Pollito," it cried as the half-chick hopped along its banks, "do come and help me by clearing away these weeds." So now I guess streams can talk. "Help you, help you indeed," exclaimed Medio Pollito, tossing his head and shaking the few feathers in his tail. "Do you think I have nothing to do but to waste my time on such trifles? Help yourself, and don't trouble busy travelers. I am off to Madrid to see the king." And hoppity-kick, away stumped Medio Pollito. A little later, he's already disobeyed his mother again by not being nice. A little later, he came to a fire that had been left by some... Now, I'm going to say this word. It is spelled different than I expected. I'm going to read it because it is here. I understand that some people take it as offensive. This is an old story. It would be just a type of person and not like a aggressive way, I guess, in this story, but it also, yeah. So I apologize if you don't like it. And if you tell me to never say it again, we'll go with that. Okay. Left by some gypsies in a wood. It was burning very low and would soon be out. "Oh, Medio Pollito," cried the fire in a weak, wavering voice as the half-chick approached. "In a few minutes I shall go quite out, unless you put some sticks and dry leaves upon me. Do help me, or I shall die." And now fire can talk. "Help you indeed," answered Medio Pollito. "I have other things to do. Gather sticks for yourself, and don't trouble me. It is a fire, sir, but you do only have one wing. I am off to Madrid to see the king." And hoppity-kick, away stumped Medio Pollito. The next morning, as he was getting near Madrid, he passed a large chestnut tree, in whose branches the wind was caught and entangled. "Oh, Medio Pollito," cried the wind, "do hop up here and help me to get free of these branches. I cannot come away, and it is so uncomfortable." It is your own fault for going there, answered Medio Pollito. I can't waste all my morning stopping here to help you. Just shake yourself off, and don't hinder me, for I am off to Madrid to see the king. And hoppity kick, away stumped Medio Pollito in great glee, for the towers and roofs of Madrid were now in sight. When he entered the town, he saw before him a great splendid house, with soldiers standing before the gates. This he knew must be the king's palace, and he determined to hop up to the front gate and wait there until the king came out. But as he was hopping past one of the back windows, the king's cook saw him. "Here is the very thing I want," he exclaimed, "for the king has just sent a message to say that he must have chicken broth for his dinner." Oh no! And opening the window, he stretched out his arm, caught Medio Pollito, and popped him into the broth pot that was standing near the fire. Oh, how wet and clammy the water felt as it went over Medio Pollito's head, making his feathers cling to his side. "Water, water," he cried in despair, "do have pity upon me and do not wet me like this." "Ah, Medio Pollito," replied the water, "you would not help me when I was a little stream away in the fields. Now you must be punished." Then the fire began to burn and scald Medio Pollito, and he danced and hopped from one side of the pot to the other, trying to get away from the heat, and crying out in pain, "Fire, fire, do not scorch me like this. You can't think how it hurts." "Ah, Medio Pollito," answered the fire, "you would not help me when I was dying away in the wood. You are being punished." At last, when the pain was so great that Medio Pollito thought he must die, the cook lifted up the lid of the pot to see if the broth was ready for the king's dinner. "Look here," he cried in horror. "This chicken is quite useless. It is burnt to a cinder. I can't send it up to the royal table." And opening the window, he threw Medio Pollito out into the street, but the wind caught him up and whirled him through the air so quickly that Medio Pollito could scarcely breathe. Are you telling me he's alive? Could scarcely breathe, and his heart beat against his side till he thought it would break. "Oh, wind," at last he gasped out, "if you hurry me along like this, you will kill me. Do let me rest a moment, or—" But he was so breathless that he could not finish his sentence. "Ah, Medio Pollito," replied the wind, "when I was caught in the branches of the chestnut— How would you get wind out of a tree anyway? I'm sorry. When I was caught in the branches of the chestnut tree, you would not help me. Now you are punished." And he swirled Medio Pollito over the roofs of the houses till they reached the highest church in the town, and there he left him fastened to the top of the steeple. And there stands Medio Pollito to this day, and if you go to Madrid and walk through the streets till you come to the highest church, you will see Medio Pollito perched on his one leg on the steeple, with his one wing drooping at his side, and gazing sadly out of his one eye over the town. I'm going to have to put this mic down and Google if that's like a real thing. There could very well be one of those on top of a church that's just like, oh yeah, that little guy's called Medio Pollito. I'm gonna look it up. But that's the end of this story, and I'll be back in a sec, and you can drop more trigger requests. Well, it looks like there really is. Yeah, It looks like there's not many people, so you can just go ahead. But it looks like there really is the weather vanes on this one building that might be implied to be a little medio pollito. Finally, I can hear more clearly. This old mic, the headphones don't sit in properly. Yes, it's one of the wooden frogs. I have one of them. I have a singing frog and I have a singing bull. We'll do the frog if you request a frog. Put those away. He is a loud boy, so I don't want to do too much of him. I had to adjust the mic. Oh, was that good? Was Singing Frog Man good? He's eating his little baton again and going back to the shelf. He now gets to sit on the desk with me, the new desk that has a shelf, so he gets to stay and watch my streams. Marvelous. Little frog. No, I think he's more of a frog. His little face was like... He's too angular. His nose is very pointy and all, and he's got those spikes. He's not quite like our round little bouncy boys that you guys have dropped into the chat. He's just a little different. Yeah, he's pointy. He's a friendlier version of that. Why not singing bull since we did singing frog? Let's do that. I'm gonna decide. always rings. Back onto your pillow, you loud bull. More frog emote ideas are always lovely. I know I had ideas and then I've forgotten them, so whatever you have. And you can tell me some too. That's a great idea. I have to do mine too. Thank you for the follow there. Hello. Yes, we should all do our taxes if we have to do those. Okay, one more. What one more? Oh, yes, a popcorn frog. I'm going to request. I want to design the popcorn bowl that he eat from. So I think I must animate that one, or we'll have to collab. But I want to design his little popcorn bowl. Oh yeah, and there was I got them. I will write them down. Popcorn frog. Yes, high thrusting leg. I got distracted by an idea, so I just ran with it. All right. The one more. I think I have decided what my one more is, because no one else has told me yet, and it is another one of the new ones on the list. It's bottle blow. You'll get what I mean. Oh, I didn't change the text, but now you hear them. You know what this is. Yes, I have two different bottles right now, and so they're at two different notes. I haven't tested what notes exactly, but I may have to end up having more bottles for more notes. But I don't think I will go with enough to do a song, because I think I would frantically be bouncing around. I don't have enough. Oh no, I don't want to use the words I was about to say. I was gonna say I don't have enough holes to blow out of. Anyways. Oh yeah, I'm sure they would. I don't know how to do that yet. I probably could put that on. Thanks, trustingly. Yeah, that's the appropriate reaction for the term saying. I wasn't thinking when I thought that. And then I said it anyway, because I was like, I can't say, oh no, I won't say that, and then not say it. I can't refer to it and then not tell you what it was. Let's see what we can do. I'm sure there's a way that I could put something on, but I'm not sure how to do that. Yeah, I just find them fun. The bottles when you blow in them and there are different notes and such. It's fun. Okay, I like it. All right. But that's probably enough of the trigger break. But I'm glad I showcased some of the new stuff. And so next break or next stream, you can request them. I don't know how long the next story is. We'll find out in a minute. Oh. They're also perfectly good for tapping on glass and stuff. Yeah. I haven't done it like through. I'd have to do it through OBS. And I don't know how to do that yet. Yeah. Oh, well then if you're going to anyway, drop it in the Discord. Okay, moving on to the next story. We'll go there. What was this one? This one is called The Story of Caliph Stork. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. We'll put that. It looks like it has sections, but it's not all that long. We'll see how long it takes to read. Typing. Haha. Well, if you keep looking into stuff, then you're like the little expert everybody can turn to, or you can think of it as, I'm going to collect all of the knowledge before I start so that I have everything I need to know if when I do start. Thank you for the follow. I'm pretty sure we're getting... Oh yeah, I was just going to say we're probably getting to the goal soon. There we go. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, people. We met another goal. Hello, Empty Trader. Welcome in. All right. First chat. Cheer, cheer, cheer. We're gonna... Ooh. No party. Good. I'm just looking at the next thing and I'm wondering if I should double check. Aha, I knew it, tetrahedron. There you go. I'm checking quickly the story because there are some words I'm like, ooh. My pronunciations might not be so great, but since when are they perfect anyway? Okay. Here we are. Settle back in for reading mode. Here we are. The Story of Caliph Stork. Part 1. Caliph Chassid of Baghdad was resting comfortably on his divan. How do you pronounce that one? My brain, like, I know this, but my brain is like I scrubbed it. Is it divan? Divan? I don't think it's divan. D-I-V-A-N. Divan. Oh my gosh. Anyway, one fine afternoon, he was smoking a long pipe, and from time to time he sipped a little coffee which a slave handed to him, and after each sip he stroked his long beard with an air of enjoyment. Just seeing the dancing emotes, always fun. Divan. It feels like one of those moments where you write a word too many times. Spoon, spoon, spoon. Anyway. Okay. Strokes his beard with an air of enjoyment. In short, anyone could see that the Caliph was in an excellent humor. This was, in fact, the best time of day in which to approach him. For just now he was pretty sure to be both affable and in good spirits. And for this reason the Grand Vizier Mansur always chose this hour in which to pay his daily visit. He arrived as usual this afternoon, but contrary to his usual custom... Oh, sorry. Contrary to his usual custom, with an anxious face, the Caliph withdrew his pipe for a moment from his lips and asked, "Why do you look so anxious, Grand Vizier?" The Grand Vizier crossed his arms on his breast and bent low before his master as he answered, "O my lord, whether my countenance be anxious or not, I know not, but down below, in the court of the palace, is a peddler with such beautiful things that I cannot help feeling annoyed at having so little money to spare. The Caliph, who wished for some time past to give his Grand Vizier a present, ordered his black slave to bring. Did we need to specify what kind of slave? It was already a horrible. Why? To bring the peddler before him at once. The slave soon returned, followed by the peddler, a short, stout man with a swarthy face and dressed in very ragged clothes. He carried a box containing all manner of wares, strings of pearls, rings, richly mounted pistols, goblets, and combs. The Caliph and his vizier inspected everything, and the Caliph chose some handsome pistols for himself and Mansur, and a jeweled comb for the vizier's wife. Just as the peddler was about to close his box, the Caliph noticed a small drawer, and asked if there was anything else in it for sale. The peddler opened the drawer and showed them a box containing a black powder and a scroll written in strange characters, which neither the Caliph nor the Mansur could read. I got these 2 articles from a merchant. From a merchant who had picked them up in the street at Mecca, said the peddler. I do not know what they may contain, but as they are of no use to me, you are welcome to have them for a trifle. The Caliph, who liked to have old manuscripts in his library, even though he could not read them, purchased the scroll in the box and dismissed the peddler. Then, being anxious to know what might be the contents of the scroll, he asked the vizier if he did not know of anyone who might be able to decipher it. Most gracious lord and master, replied the vizier, near the great mosque lives a man called Selim the Learned, who knows every language under the sun. Send for him. Send for him. It may be that he will be able to interpret these mysterious characters. The learned Selim was summoned immediately. Selim, said the Seraph, I hear you are a scholar. Look well at this scroll and see whether you can read it. If you can, I will give you a robe of honor, but if you fail, I will order you to receive 12 strokes on your cheeks and 25 on the soles of your feet, because you have been falsely called Selim the Learned. I mean, that's a bit aggressive, dude, but okay. Selim prostrated himself and said, Be it according to your will, O master. Then he gazed long at the scroll. Suddenly he exclaimed, May I die, O my lord, if this isn't Latin. Well, said the Caliph, if this is Latin, let us see what it means. So Selim began to translate. Thou who mayest find this, praise Allah for his mercy. Whoever shall snuff the powder in this box, and at the same time shall pronounce the word mutabor, can transform himself into any creature he likes, and will understand the language of all animals. When he wishes to resume the human form, he has only to bow 3 times toward the east, and to repeat the same word. Be careful, however, when wearing the shape of some beast or bird, not to laugh, or thou wilt certainly forget the magic word and remain an animal forever. Okay, so animals aren't allowed to laugh. Don't laugh and you'll be fine. All right. When Selim the Learned had read this, the Caliph was delighted. He made the wise man swear not to tell the matter to anyone, gave him a splendid robe, and dismissed him. Then he said to his vizier, That's what I call a good bargain, Mansur. I am longing for the moment when I can become some animal. Tomorrow morning I shall expect you early. We will go into the country, take some snuff from my box. Take some snuff from my box, and then hear what is being said in air, earth, and water. Part/Chapter 2. Next morning, Caliph Chasid had barely finished dressing and breakfasting when the Grand Vizier arrived, according to orders, to accompany him in his expedition. The Caliph stuck the snuff box in his girdle, and having desired his servants to remain at home, started off with the Grand Vizier only in attendance. Thank you for the follow. It's in... I need to have a bigger window so I can properly see people's names. I'm keeping... Yeah, it's very small. According to orders... Caliph's now stop. First they walked through the palace gardens, but they looked in vain for some creature which would tempt them to try their magic powder. Oh, I forgot an ad. Ooh. Okay, I will finish this. They're looking for... that would tempt them for the powder. At length the vizier suggested going further onto a pond which lay beyond the town, and where he had often seen a variety of creatures, especially storks, whose grave, dignified appearance and constant chatter had often attracted his attention. The Caliph consented, and they went straight to the pond. As soon as they arrived, they remarked a stork strutting up and down with a stately air, hunting for frogs, and now and then muttering something to itself. At the same time, they saw another stork far above the sky flying towards the same spot. There's about to be an ad that will drop in. Oh, hello, Ramses. Welcome. My ad's about to run. Sorry about that. I was not paying attention to it. But we'll jump back in just a second. They're spotting the storks, and it looks like they're about to decide to turn into storks for this. And note that the storks are hunting for frogs. I hope not our frogs, but okay. we had that chariot of frogs, and I think that might be something I want to design, but I don't know what I would do with it. Like, what would a whole herd of frogs? I don't know. But it's an interesting thought. Oh, come on, ad. Don't threaten to start and then don't start. There you go. Now it's running. It's so annoying that way. All right. Okay, distracted. Okay. And we're back. So they've seen storks. They're thinking they're going to do it. They're going to turn into storks right now, I'm sure. I would wager my beard, most gracious master, said the Grand Vizier, that these two long legs will have a good chat together. How would it be if we turned ourselves into storks? Well said, replied the Caliph, but first let us remember carefully how we are to become men once more. True. Bow 3 times. It looks like he was talking to himself. Oh no, he is just saying things to us. When he says true. Anyway, bow 3 times towards the east and say Mutabor, and I shall be Caliph and you my Grand Vizier again. Psycho stories. But for heaven's sake, don't laugh or we are lost. But welcome, Dumda. Welcome in. Yeah, for whatever reason, the true here, I'm expecting that to have been the Grand Vizier that said that, and they didn't separate that out, but I guess maybe that's just anyway, okay. As the Caliph spoke, he saw the second stork circling round his head and gradually flying towards the earth. Quickly he drew the box from his girdle, took a good pinch of the snuff, and offered one to Mansur, who also took one, and both cried together, Mutabor. Hello. Instantly their legs shriveled up and grew thin and red. Their smart yellow slippers turned to clumsy stork's feet. Their arms to wings, their necks began to sprout from between their shoulders and grew a yard long. Their beards disappeared and their bodies were covered with feathers. "You've got a fine long bill, Sir Vizier," cried the Caliph, after standing for some time lost in astonishment. "By the beard of the Prophet, I never saw such a thing in all my life." "My very humble thanks," replied the Grand Vizier as he bent his long neck. "But if I may venture to say so, your Highness is even handsomer as a stork than as a Caliph. But come, if it so pleases you, let us go near our comrades there and find out whether we really do understand the language of storks." Meantime, the second stork had reached the ground. It first scraped its bill with its claw, stroked down its feathers, and then advanced toward the first stork. The two newly made storks lost no time in drawing near, and to their amazement overheard the following conversation. "Good morning, Dame Longlegs. You are out early this morning." "Yes, indeed, dear Chatterbill. I'm getting myself a morsel of breakfast. May I offer you a joint of lizard or frog's thigh?" "A thousand thanks, but I have really no appetite this morning. I am here for a very different purpose. I am to dance today before my father's guests, and I have come to the meadow for a little quiet practice." Whereupon the young stork began to move about with the most wonderful steps. The Caliph and Manser looked on in surprise for some time, but when at last she balanced herself in a picturesque attitude on one leg and flapped her wings gracefully up and down, they could not hold out no longer. A prolonged peal burst from each of their bills, and it was some time before they would recover their composure. "Oh no, they've laughed. They did it. They did the thing they're not supposed to do." "That was the best joke," said he. "This is also quite rude. You've come in to observe their culture, and you just laugh at a dance? Screw you. Anyway, I didn't know there are royalty that do that to different cultures, and I am particularly unimpressed with a certain someone anyway about that. That's the best joke," said he, "I've ever seen. It's a pity the stupid creatures were scared away by our laughter, or no doubt they would have sung next. And you would have laughed at them? How rude." Suddenly, however, the Vizier remembered how strictly they had been warned not to laugh during their transformation. He at once communicated his fears to the Caliph, who exclaimed, "By Mecca and Medina, it would indeed prove a poor joke if I had to remain a stork for the remainder of my days. Do just try and remember the stupid word. It has slipped my memory. We must bow 3 times eastwards and say, Moo, moo, moo." They turned to the east and fell to bowing till their bills touched the ground, but oh horror, the magic word was quite forgotten. And however often the Caliph bowed, and however touchingly his Vizier cried, "Moo, moo," they could not recall it. And the unhappy Chassid and Manser remained storks as they were. End of the chapter 2. Here's chapter 3, or part 3. The 2 enchanted birds wandered sadly on through the meadows in their misery. In their misery they could not think what to do next. They could not rid themselves of their new forms. There was no use in returning to the town and saying who they were, for who would believe a stork who announced that he was a caliph? And even if they did believe him, would the people of Baghdad consent to let a stork rule over them? So they lounged about for several days, supporting themselves on fruits, which, however, they found some difficulty in eating with their long bills. They did not much care to eat frogs or lizards. Their one comfort in their sad plight was the power of flying, and accordingly they often flew over the roofs of Baghdad to see what was going on there. During the first few days they noticed signs of much disturbance and distress in the streets. But about the 4th day, as they sat on the roof of the palace, they perceived a splendid procession passing below them along the street. Drums and trumpets sounded. A man in a scarlet mantle embroidered in gold sat on a splendidly caparisoned horse surrounded by richly dressed slaves. Half Baghdad crowded after him. and they all shouted, "Hail Mizra, the Lord of Baghdad!" The two storks on the palace roof looked at each other. A lot of these, sometimes the animals can speak, sometimes they can't. Considering that they had to turn into storks to be able to understand animals, presumably the animals wouldn't be able to speak, but I don't know. We'll find out. Hail Mizra, the Lord of Baghdad. Two storks on the palace roof looked at each other, and Caliph Chassid said, "Can you guess now, Grand Vizier, why I have been enchanted? This Mizra is the son of my deadly enemy, the mighty magician Kashner? SCH, I don't know how to pronounce in this. We're gonna guess Kashner, who in an evil moment vowed vengeance on me. Still, I will not despair. Come with me, my faithful friend. We will go to the grave of the prophet, and perhaps at that sacred spot the spell may be loosened." They rose from the palace roof and spread their wings toward Medina. But flying was not quite an easy matter, for the two storks had had but little practice as yet. "Oh, my lord," gasped the vizier after a couple of hours, "I can get on no longer. You really fly too quick for me. Besides, it is nearly evening, and we should do well to find some place in which to spend the night." Chassid listened with favor to his servant's suggestion, and perceiving the valley beneath them a ruin which seemed to promise shelter, they flew towards it. The building in which they promised to pass the night had apparently been formerly a castle. Some handsome pillars still stood amongst the heaps of ruins, and several rooms, which yet remained in their fair preservation, gave evidence of former splendor. Chassid and his companion wandered along the passages seeking a dry spot when suddenly Mansur stood still. "My lord and master," he whispered, "if it were not absurd for a grand vizier, and still more for a stork, to be afraid of ghosts, I should feel quite nervous, for someone or something close by me has sighed and moaned quite audibly." I'm going to guess that it's not a ghost, but it's like a small animal or something, I don't know. The Caliph stood still and distinctly heard a low weeping sound which seemed to proceed from a human being rather than from any animal. Full of curiosity, he was about to rush towards the spot from whence the sounds of woe came, when the vizier caught him by the wing with his bill and implored him not to expose himself to fresh and unknown dangers. The Caliph, however, under whose stork's breast a brave heart beat, tore himself away with the loss of a few feathers, and hurried down a dark passage. He saw a door which stood ajar, and through which he distinctly heard sighs mingled with sobs. He pushed open the door with his bill, but remained on the threshold, astonished at the sight which met his eyes. On the floor of the ruined chamber, which was but scantily lighted by a small barred window, sat a large screech owl. Big tears rolled from its large round eyes, and in a hoarse voice it uttered its complaints through its crooked beak. As soon as it saw the Caliph and his vizier, who had crept up meanwhile, it gave vent to a joyful cry. It gently wiped the tears from its eyes with its spotted brown wings, and to the great amazement of the two visitors, addressed them in good human Arabic. "Welcome, ye storks. You are a good sign of my deliverance, for it was foretold me that a piece of good fortune should befall me through a stork." When the Caliph had recovered from his surprise, he drew up his feet into a graceful position, bent his long neck, and said, "O screech owl, from your words I am led to believe that we see in you a companion in misfortune. But alas, your hope that you may attain your deliverance through us is but a vain one. You will know our helplessness when you have heard our story." The screech owl begged him to relate it, and the Caliph accordingly told him what we already know. Chapter 4. When the Caliph had ended, the owl thanked him and said, "You hear my story, and own that I am no less fortunate than yourselves. My father is the king of the Indies. I, his only daughter, am named Lusa. That magician Kashner, who enchanted you, has been the cause of my misfortunes too. He came one day to my father and demanded my hand for his son Misra. My father, who was rather hasty, ordered him to be thrown downstairs. The wretch not long after managed to approach me under another form, and one day when I was in the garden and asked for some refreshment, he brought me, in the disguise of a slave, a draught which changed me at once to this horrid shape. Whilst I was fainting with terror, he transported me here, and cried to me with his awful voice, There shall you remain, lonely and hideous, despised even by the brutes, till the end of your days, or till someone of his own free will asks you to be his wife. Thus do I avenge myself on you and your proud father." This is now 2 stories in which it's like an offense to be turned into an owl. What's wrong with owls? They're freaking gorgeous. Anyway. Since then, many months have passed away. Sad and lonely do I live like any hermit within these walls, avoided by the world and a terror even to the animals. The beauties of nature are hidden from me, for I am blind by day, and it is only when the moon sheds her pale light on this spot that the veil falls from my eyes and I can see. The owl paused and once more wiped her eyes with her wing, for the recital of her woes had drawn fresh tears from her. The Caliph fell into deep thought on hearing his story of the princess. "If I am not much mistaken," said he, "there is some mysterious connection between our misfortunes, but how to find the key to the riddle is the question." The owl answered, "Oh, my lord, I too feel sure of this, for in my earliest youth a wise woman foretold that a stork would bring me some great happiness, and I think I could tell you how we might save ourselves." The Caliph was much surprised, and asked her what she meant. "The magician who has made us both miserable," said she, "comes once a month to these ruins. Not far from this room is a large hall, where he is in the habit of feasting with his companions. I have often watched them. They tell each other about their evil deeds, and possibly the magic word, which you have forgotten, may be mentioned." Yeah, they do. They symbolize wisdom. And I mean, on the one hand, the owls, they're a predator that will go after other people, other animals, but on the other hand, usually the predators are like strong and cool, but maybe it's because, oh, but you were princesses that were turned into an owl, and that's not princessly. I don't know. Okay, but maybe you'll hear the magic word. That's cool. Owls are great. "Oh, dearest princess," exclaimed the Caliph, "say, when does he come, and where is the hall?" Everybody do need to eat, and I'm not going to hate on that. The owl paused a moment and then said, "Do not think me unkind, but I can only grant your request on one condition." "Speak, speak," said Chassid. "Command, I will gladly do whatever you wish." "Well," replied the owl, "you see, I should like to be free too, but this can only be if one of you will offer me his hand in marriage." The stork seemed rather taken aback by this suggestion, and the Caliph beckoned to his vizier to retire and consult with him. When they were outside the door, the Caliph said, "Grand Vizier, this is a tiresome business. However, you can take her." "Indeed," said the vizier, "so that when I go home, my wife may scratch my eyes out. Besides, I am an old man, and your highness is still young and unmarried, and far more suitable match for a young and lovely princess." "That's just where it is," sighed the Caliph, whose wings drooped in a dejected manner. "How do you know she is young and lovely?" "I call it buying a pig in a poke." So now the story is about, well, I'm not going to save this person who's in a terrible situation like me, and she's trying to help me. No, I'm just going to, gonna need her to be properly pretty for me to do this. They argued on for some time, but at length, when the Caliph saw plainly that his vizier would rather remain a stork to the end of his days than marry the owl, he determined to fulfill the condition himself. The owl was delighted. So she's going to marry an old man who already has a wife because the Caliph is a coward and vain. The owl was delighted. She owned that she could not have married, that they could not have arrived at a better time, as most probably the magicians would meet that very night. She then proceeded to lead the two storks to the chamber. I'm going to put out a prediction that she's going to transform, she's going to be gorgeous, and then the Caliph is going to be like, whoa, gimme. It's going to be a whole moment. Anyway. They're going to meet this very night. She then proceeded to lead the two storks to the chamber. They passed through a long, dark passage, till at length a bright ray of light shone before them through the chinks of a half-ruined wall. When they reached it, the owl advised them to keep very quiet. Through the gap near which they stood, they could with ease survey the whole of the large hall. It was adorned with splendid carved pillars. A number of colored lamps replaced the light of day. In the middle of the hall stood a round table covered with a variety of dishes, and about the table was a divan on which 8 men were seated. In one of these bad men, the two recognized the peddler who had sold the magic powder. The man next him begged him to relate all his latest doings, and amongst them he told the story of the Caliph and his vizier. What I'm wondering is, were they the storks? How did he confirm that they would laugh? Is the real question for me. You don't know for sure that they would laugh. Anyway. And what kind of word did you give them? Asked another old sorcerer. A very difficult Latin word. It is mutabor. And here we are, we've got the word. The final part. Final chapter 5. As soon as the storks heard this, they were nearly beside themselves with joy. They ran at such a pace to the door of the ruined castle that the owl could scarcely keep up with them. Because let's be real, they're ready to just abandon the owl. When they reached it, the Caliph turned to the owl and said with much feeling, "Deliverer of my friend and myself, as a proof of my eternal gratitude, oh, hey, he's done it, accept me as your husband." Then he turned toward the east. 3 times the storks bowed their long necks to the sun, which was just rising over the mountains. Mutabor, they both cried, and in an instant they were once more transformed. In the rapture of their newly given lives, we lost it. In the rapture of their newly given lives, master and servant fell laughing and weeping into each other's arms. Who shall describe their surprise when they at last turned round and beheld standing before them a beautiful lady exquisitely dressed. With a smile she held out her hand to the Caliph and asked, "Do you not recognize your screech owl?" It was she. The Caliph was so entranced by her grace and beauty that he declared being turned into a stork had been the best piece of luck which had ever befallen him. And you almost ruined it. The 3 set out at once for Baghdad. Fortunately, the Caliph found not only the box with the magic powder, but also his purse and his girdle. He was therefore able to buy in the nearest village all they required for their journey, and so at last they reached the gates of Baghdad. Here the Caliph's arrival created the greatest sensation. He had been quite given up for dead, and the people were greatly rejoiced to see their beloved ruler again. Their rage with the usurper Misra, however, was great in proportion. They marched in force to the palace and took the old magician and his son prisoners. The Caliph sent the magician to the room where the princess had lived as an owl, and there had him hanged. As the son, however, knew nothing of his father's acts, the Caliph gave him his choice between death and a pinch of the magic snuff. Well, he didn't know, so I guess I'll kill him. Or exile him still. But, as if you're being very kind about still offering death. When he chose the latter, the Grand Vizier handed him the box. One good pinch, and the magic word transformed him into a stork. So he didn't get to pick which animal? Okay. The Caliph ordered him to be confined in an iron cage. We couldn't have let him live in the wild. Oh my god. And placed in the palace gardens. Caliph Chassid lived long and happily with his wife, the princess. His merriest time was when the Grand Vizier visited him in the afternoon, and when the Caliph was in particularly high spirits, he would condescend to mimic the Vizier's appearance when he was a stork. He would strut gravely, and with well-stiffened legs, up and down the room, chattering and showing how he had vainly bowed to the east and cried, "Moo, moo." The Caliphess and her children were always much entertained by this performance. But when the Caliph went on nodding and bowing and calling "moo, moo" too long, the Vizier would threaten laughingly to tell the Caliphess the subject of the discussion carried on one night outside the door of the Princess Screech Owl. "Good on you, Mr. Vizier." Be like, do you want me to tell her? Do you want me to freaking tell her? He still gets to live at the palace? Yeah. To just let him go hang out with the stork that danced. He's probably kinder. He'd be like, "Oh, no, that is nice dance. Cool. Can you teach? Can you teach me? I'm new to this whole stork thing. Teach me how to stork dance." But anyway, that's the end of the story of the Caliph Stork. Da-da-da. What a time. I've probably pronounced a good lot of things incorrectly, but I'll Google it after and then know and fix things. All right. I am actually thinking it's 20 minutes earlier than normal, but I think I ought to end the stream early. I'm sorry to suggest it. Oh no, this next story is very short. I could justify reading the next story. All right, we'll do that. Just readjusting. Okay. Ooh, or we can raid and then I can disappear. I can give someone else the little pack of you. That's a good idea. I am a month old now. Let's raid. Let's go raid somebody. I like it. Let's do it. Where are we raiding? Ayla? Let's... Ooh, a new model. Well then let's go over there. Brooke XYZ, is that what I should put in? What is the name that I should put in when I say raid channel? Okay, then we'll put that in. Hopefully it pops up correctly. It looks correct. All right. She's just welcomed in some raiders, so we'd be doing even more raiders over there. But yeah, let's go. Let's go join. Hee hee. Alright, we have just a little bit. I don't have any of those messages that go in. But here we go. 2 seconds. 1 second. Ah. Never mind. 1 minute. Why is it such a long raid now?
going down to